Hey everyone. I know a lot of you are probably still processing the election results, kind of trying to figure out what it all means.
Yeah, it's a lot to unpack for sure.
Exactly. And that's what we're here to do today, take a deep dive into it all. You know,
Really dig in and try to make sense of things.
exactly. And we've got a lot of ground to cover, a real mix of perspectives to consider.
Oh, absolutely. From articles like in the Atlantic, we've got Scientific American,
Even some personal accounts from
yeah,
Greg Palast and,
yeah, and some excerpts from some Substack newsletters.
yeah, and some excerpts from some Substack newsletters.
So, a whole range of viewpoints to consider, and we're going to focus on those anxieties that so many of you have shared with us, specifically around economic stability, personal safety, and even
Yeah, some folks even talking about seeking asylum in other
it's
countries.
a lot, I know.
Yeah, it is.
But we're here to help you make sense of it all, equip you with the knowledge.
Knowledge is power, right?
It is. It is. So let's dive in. One of the first things that struck me looking at these sources, especially Americans who want out, is the raw emotion just pouring out. Yeah, it's palpable, isn't it? It's not just like dry political analysis.
Right, it's to person.
It's fear, anxiety, really bubbling to the surface.
And it's interesting how diverse those fears are.
Absolutely. For some people, it's about physical safety, the potential for violence, or like extremist groups feeling emboldened,
Yeah.
you know?
Right, right. And then for others, it's more about specific rights. They're worried about losing, like,
Yeah, like the future of same-sex marriage with a more conservative Supreme Court.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And then there's this underlying dread, this almost like apocalyptic feeling in some of the accounts.
Oh, for sure. Like the very fabric of American society is unraveling.
Yeah, yeah. This is one anecdote in Americans Who Want Out that really stuck with me.
Oh, yeah. Tell me about that.
It's an Afghan refugee who compares the current climate in the U.S. to fleeing the Taliban.
Wow, that's heavy.
It is heavy stuff, and it really drives home the gravity of this situation for some people.
Absolutely. But then you see a totally different response in something like a Trump victory. It's almost defiant, you know?
Oh, yeah, there's a real call to action in that one.
It is. The author literally says, have a good cray, spin on your heel, get a coffee, and let's fucking go. It's like, okay, even in the face of fear, you have a choice, a way to channel that energy into something proactive.
I love that it's like a spectrum of responses.
It is from sheer panic to roll up your sleeves and fight.
And I think it's important to acknowledge that, wherever you fall on that spectrum, your feelings are valid.
Absolutely valid. And understanding those feelings, both our own and those of others, is going to be crucial as we navigate this new landscape, right? It's going to require empathy, open communication, a willingness to bridge those emotional divides.
Yeah, for sure. So, okay, let's move beyond the immediate emotional reactions for a minute and delve into some of the potential concrete shifts we might see, particularly on the political and social fronts, David, from in Trump won now what?
Hmm.
Paints a pretty bleak picture, warning that the U.S. might become a different kind of country.
Yeah, his concerns are multi-layered, aren't they? He talks about the potential for rampant corruption, the erosion of the civil service, attacks on the media, and even a shift towards kleptocracy, essentially, rule by thieves.
Kleptocracy. Wow, that's a term I hadn't heard before, but
Yeah.
it's chilling when you think about it.
It is. It speaks to this deeper fear about the future of American democracy itself, you know?
Yeah,
And it really echoes those anxieties in a Trump victory, where the author practically pleads with readers to make the American experiment work again.
right. There's this real sense of urgency.
There is. And then the Elon Times brings up this whole other layer of worry. Media manipulation, even in the age of independent platforms.
Oh, yeah, that one was really thought-provoking, the idea that even with alternatives to mainstream media, the concentration of power in the hands of a few can still be used to shape narratives,
Yeah.
control information.
Absolutely, and it raises some huge questions, like how do we ensure a free flow of information and diverse viewpoints when individuals with these massive platforms can so easily influence public opinion? It's a real challenge to our traditional notions of a free press and the role of media in a democracy.
So we've got potential political upheaval, social anxieties, worries about information control. It's a lot.
Mhm.
And I know a lot of our listeners are also deeply concerned about the economic implications of all of this, especially when it comes to their personal finances.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
And understandably so. The uncertainty around economic policy, the potential for global instability, it all adds up to this feeling of precariousness when it comes to personal finances, you
Now
know?
people are worried about their jobs, their savings, the future of things like Social Security and pensions.
Valid concerns, absolutely, especially given some of the proposed policy shifts out there.
Right. And while we can't predict the future with certainty, We could look for clues in the sources we have, right? Like, Trump victory is a gut punch to U.S. climate action. While that article focuses on environmental issues, it also offers some economic insights.
Oh, definitely. It discusses Trump's promises to promote fossil fuels and potentially repeal the Inflation Reduction Act.
So even if we set aside the environmental debate for a second, that signals potential economic volatility, a shift away from renewable energy investments, and possible repercussions in the global energy market.
Exactly. It's all interconnected. And then you've got from in Trump won now what? Gary bringing up the possibility of a global trade war.
Which, let's be honest, would impact everyone's wallet.
It would. It's this complex web of interconnected systems, right? Economic shifts rarely happen in isolation. What happens on the global stage inevitably trickles down to our personal finances.
So with all this uncertainty swirling around, it's no surprise that people are starting to consider some pretty drastic options.
Oh, yeah,
Like leaving the U.S. altogether, want to leave the U.S. Reports this massive spike in searches for how to move to Canada immediately following the election results.
wow, it's a real indicator of the level of anxiety and fear out there.
It is. The article highlights several potential destinations, each with its own unique appeal.
Let's hear it.
Well, Canada, of course, is always a popular choice.
Sure, proximity, shared language, the healthcare system.
Exactly, but we're also seeing a growing interest in places like Spain, Portugal, and Mexico.
Each offering something a little different.
Yeah, affordability, a sense of safety and stability, it really runs the gamut.
It's like people are scouting for lifeboats, looking for a safe haven from the storm they see brewing.
That's a great analogy. And that's actually where we'll pick up in the next part of this deep dive.
Perfect.
We'll explore those emigration options in more detail, look at the pros and cons and the realities of starting over in a new country.
Should be fascinating.
It should be. We'll also hear from some individuals who've actually made that leap, hear about their motivations, their challenges, and their advice for those thinking about doing the same.
Sounds good. So we've talked about the emotional landscape, the potential political and social shifts, and those economic anxieties that a lot of folks are grappling with.
Yeah, and for some, it's led to this idea of like a drastic step,
Where?
leaving the U.S. altogether.
Right. Want to leave the U.S. really digs into that, the whole emigration thing.
Yeah, they reported that searches for how to move to Canada just like skyrocketed after the election.
Makes sense.
But it's not just Canada. People are looking at all sorts of places, hoping to find, a place where they feel safer, more secure.
Right, like where can I go to escape this?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So let's unpack some of those options, starting with Europe. Spain seems to be a real hotspot, especially for digital nomads and retirees.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Why Spain, do you think?
Mhm.
Besides the, paella and siestas.
Well, the article highlights their new digital nomad visa. It allows remote workers to live and work there for an extended period.
Right.
But here's the cool part. It also lets you travel throughout the entire Schengen zone.
Oh, wow. So you could be working from like a beachside cafe in Barcelona one week and then exploring the vineyards of Tuscany the next.
Exactly. That flexibility is pretty appealing, right?
It is, for sure. But what about folks who aren't digital nomads? What other options are out there?
Well, if affordability is a top concern, Vietnam was just ranked the cheapest place for expats to live in 2024.
Really? Vietnam? That's interesting. I never would have thought of that.
Yeah, it seems like a pretty amazing place. The article paints a picture of, like, exploring ancient temples, bustling markets, stunning rice paddies, all while enjoying delicious and inexpensive street food.
Okay, now you're speaking my language.
Right. And it's becoming increasingly accessible for Americans. The article mentions they have a relatively relaxed visa process for foreigners, especially those who are working or retired.
That makes sense. So we've got options in Europe, Asia. What about closer to home? Canada is always a popular choice, right?
It is, for sure.
Yeah.
The proximity, the shared language and cultural similarities, and of course the universal healthcare system are all huge draws. Plus, Canada has relatively straightforward residency options, I think.
Right. But I imagine the cost of living in Canada is something to consider.
Oh, absolutely. The article mentions that it can be quite high, especially in major cities like Vancouver and Toronto. So if budget is a big concern, Mexico might be a better fit.
Makes sense. Mexico's got that lower cost of living, and it's become increasingly popular for retirees and remote workers, too.
It's got a lot to offer. Beautiful beaches, vibrant culture, the food. Need I say more?
You had me at food.
Yep.
And it's relatively easy to get residency there, too, right?
Yeah, much easier than some other places.
Yeah.
But here's the thing. Whether it's Canada, Mexico, or anywhere else, immigration is a huge decision.
It is not something to be taken lightly.
Exactly. It's not just about escaping a situation you dislike. It's about finding a place where you can truly thrive, a place that aligns with your values, your lifestyle, and your long-term goals, you know?
Totally. And that brings us to another crucial point that Want to Leave the U.S. makes: the importance of planning. This isn't a decision you make on a whim.
Right. There are financial considerations, legal hurdles, cultural adjustments, a whole host of things to think about.
Definitely. They actually feature some advice from a financial advisor, Alex Ingram, who really cautions against making impulsive decisions.
Makes sense. What does he say?
Well, he stresses the importance of having a solid financial plan, understanding the tax implications, researching the healthcare system, and cost of living in your chosen destination, really doing your homework.
He's got a point. Leaving everything behind can be liberating, but it also comes with its own set of challenges, right?
Totally. It's about finding that balance between that desire for change and the need for careful preparation.
So, while the idea of starting fresh in a new country might be tempting, it's crucial to approach it with a level head and a solid plan.
Couldn't agree more. Now, even if leaving the U.S. isn't on your radar, there are still ways to navigate the potential turbulence ahead, right? To create a more secure and fulfilling life for yourself right where you are.
Okay, I like that. So let's shift gears a bit and talk about resilience, because burying our heads in the sand isn't going to help anyone.
Exactly. This isn't about giving in to fear. It's about empowering ourselves with knowledge and action.
Love that. So what does that look like in practice? What are some concrete steps people can take to navigate this, turbulent future?
Well, first, let's acknowledge that we're not in this alone. There's strength in numbers and connecting with others who share your values and concerns.
Like finding those lifeboats and tying our fortunes together as a Trump victory suggests.
Exactly. Seek out communities, whether it's online or in person, where you can find support, share information, strategize together.
There's power in collective action, right? Whether it's organizing for political change, supporting organizations fighting for your rights, or simply having a network of people who get it, who understand what you're going through.
Absolutely. And don't underestimate the power of individual actions, too. Even small steps can make a difference.
Like what? Give me some examples.
Well, for starters, stay informed. Don't just rely on social media or hyper-partisan news sources. Seek out diverse perspectives, fact-check information carefully, be wary of misinformation.
Knowledge is power, right?
Yeah,
Our best defense against manipulation and propaganda.
it is. And on that note, protect your digital privacy. Be mindful of what you share online. Use strong passwords. Consider privacy-enhancing tools, all that good stuff.
Especially with those concerns about potential government surveillance and the use of data for partisan purposes, like the Elon Times talked about.
Exactly. Now, let's talk about financial resilience. This is something that comes up a lot in the sources, all those anxieties around economic instability.
Right, people are worried about their jobs, their savings, the future of Social Security. It's a big deal.
It is. And while we can't predict the future, we can take steps to prepare for potential economic downturns, right?
Okay, so financial advice from a podcast. I'm no expert.
Haha. No, we're not giving financial advice. But we can highlight some key principles. Start by assessing your financial situation. Create a budget, track your spending, look for areas where you can cut back.
Okay, that's practical. It's about taking control of your finances, even if you're feeling out of control in other areas of your life.
Exactly. And consider building an emergency fund. Having a cushion of savings can provide some peace of mind and help you weather those unexpected storms.
It's like having a life raft for your finances.
I like that. Now, this next one might sound counterintuitive, but it's crucial. Invest in your well-being.
Wait, what? Shouldn't I be stockpiling supplies and building a bunker?
Maybe not. We're talking about emotional and mental resilience. Prioritize self-care, whether it's spending time in nature, connecting with loved ones, pursuing hobbies, or even seeking professional support.
Right, because if we're constantly stressed and anxious, we're not going to be able to make clear decisions or take effective action.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Take care of your mental and emotional health so you can be strong and resilient in the face of whatever challenges come your way.
So it's about finding that balance, right, between preparing for potential hardship and maintaining a sense of hope and well-being.
You got it. It's a tightrope walk for sure, but an essential one for navigating uncertain times.
And remember, you're not alone in this. Reach out to others, build community, and remember that even small acts of courage and kindness can make a difference.
Couldn't have said it better myself. Now, let's shift gears again and talk about something that's been looming over this entire conversation, the whole issue of election interference.
Yeah, Greg Palast's warning in How Trump on a Warning is hard to shake. It feels like we're teetering on the edge of a democratic crisis.
It's definitely sobering, and it's crucial that we don't just dismiss his concerns as, like, conspiracy theories.
Right, because even if we disagree with his specific predictions, the underlying issues he raises are incredibly important.
Absolutely. The potential for voter suppression, the manipulation of electoral processes, the influence of dark money in politics, these are all threats to the integrity of our democracy, regardless of who wins or loses.
So what can we do about it? It feels like such a massive systemic problem.
It is, but that doesn't mean we're powerless. Awareness is the first step. Educate yourself about the various tactics used to undermine elections, from gerrymandering to voter purges to the spread of misinformation.
Okay, and then what?
And then we take action, support organizations working to protect voting rights, contact your elected officials, hold them accountable for ensuring fair and transparent elections.
Right, make our voices heard.
And
What about on a more individual level? What can we do?
be a vigilant citizen, fact-check information, report suspicious activity, and encourage others to do the same.
We can't afford to be complacent. Democracy requires active participation, not passive observation.
Exactly. Now, let's zoom out for a moment and connect this to the broader themes we've been discussing. Whether it's economic instability, social division, or threats to democracy, these are all complex, interconnected challenges.
And it can feel overwhelming, especially after a divisive election like this one.
They can. But here's the thing. Complexity also means there are multiple points of intervention. We can't solve these problems overnight, but we can chip away at them bit by bit through individual actions, community engagement, and systemic change.
It's about focusing on what we can control, even when the world feels chaotic and unpredictable.
Exactly, and remembering that even small acts of courage, kindness, and resilience can have a ripple effect.
So, where do we go from here? What's the next step in this journey of navigating a turbulent future?
That's a question each of us needs to answer for ourselves. But here's a thought to consider. How can we contribute to building a more just, equitable, and resilient society, regardless of who's in power?
That's a powerful question. It's about shifting our focus from reacting to external events to proactively creating the kind of world we want to live in.
I like that. And that requires us to step outside our comfort zones, to engage with diverse perspectives, to have those difficult conversations, and to be willing to challenge our own assumptions.
Because true progress rarely happens in isolation.
Right. It requires collaboration, empathy, and a shared commitment to a better future. So as we move forward into this uncertain terrain, let's do so with open minds, open hearts, and a determination to make a positive impact.
And remember, you're not alone in this. We're all in this together. Okay, so we've talked about the emotional fallout, the potential political and economic shifts, even the possibility of leaving the U.S. altogether. But now I think it's time to circle back to that question you raised earlier. How do we build a more just, equitable, and resilient society, regardless of who's in power? Because it's easy to get caught up in the fear and anxiety and feel like, well, what can I do? These problems feel so big, so systemic.
It's true. These are massive challenges, interconnected in so many ways. But here's where I find hope. Complexity also means there are multiple entry points for change. It's like, think of it like a tapestry. Each individual thread might seem small, insignificant on its own. But woven together, they create something strong, resilient.
I like that, the tapestry analogy.
Yeah.
So what are some of those individual threads we can start weaving, those actions, maybe small, but still part of a bigger picture?
Well, knowledge is a powerful thread, right? Educate yourself on the issues you care about. Read books, articles, listen to podcasts like this one. Engage in conversations with people who hold different viewpoints than you. Challenge your own biases. Be willing to learn and grow. And then use that knowledge to advocate for change.
So it's not just about passively absorbing information. It's about actively using it to shape the world around us.
Exactly. And that can take so many forms. Contact your elected officials. Voice your concerns. Hold them accountable, even if you disagree with them. Support organizations working on the ground, the ones fighting for the causes you believe in. Remember, democracy is not a spectator sport. It requires participation.
Absolutely. And what about on a more personal level within our communities? What can we do to build that resilience, that sense of interconnectedness?
Don't underestimate the power of simply showing up. Volunteer your time, support local businesses, get to know your neighbors, especially those from different backgrounds than your own. Strong communities are the foundation of a resilient society, a safety net woven from those individual connections.
It's like instead of escaping on those lifeboats, we're working together to strengthen the ship we're all on.
I love that. And amidst all the action and advocacy, don't forget to take care of yourself. Practice self-care, cultivate gratitude, find those moments of joy and connection, even in the midst of chaos.
Because you can't pour from an empty cup, right? We need to nourish ourselves to be able to show up for ourselves and for others.
Exactly. So as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you with this. Change rarely happens in these grand gestures. It's the accumulation of small, consistent actions driven by knowledge, compassion, and a commitment to building a better future. That's how we weave that tapestry of resilience, thread by thread, hope by hope.
Thank you all for joining us on this deep dive. We hope it's given you some food for thought, maybe some tools and inspiration for action, and a little bit of hope, however fragile, to carry with you. Remember, you are not alone in this. We're all in this together.